named Lloyd. We grew up as regular old country boys, having all sorts of fun together. We collected baseball cards, played with our toy guns, went to the pool. We did just about everything together. When my dad took me out hunting for the first time, Lloyd came along then as well. Growing up, we really were inseparable. This happened when the two of us were in high school. Lloyd and I lived just off a rural route way out of town. This was a very poor area, and we both lived in pretty old rundown houses. We had grown up in the 70s and early 80s. My family was fortunate enough to have a color television, but we didn't have anything like cable. That didn't matter too much to us kids, though, because most of the stuff we did was outside. It was a really hot summer night when this happened. Lloyd was over at my house, which was usual. We were both 16 years old at the time. We had been in my room listening to music together pretty much all night long. After a while, though, we began to get a little bit bored. Lloyd wanted to smoke a couple of joints that he had on him. He thought that we could get away with it in my room, but there was no way I was going to let him do that here. I couldn't take the chance of my dad smelling it. I didn't really know if he would have gotten in trouble for it or not, but it was not a chance I was willing to take. We lived right on the edge of a huge forest. It was a place we had explored and hunted and hung out in, and even smoked joints in, before I let Lloyd know that if he really wanted to smoke so badly, then we should probably go for a quick walk in the woods. It was already past midnight, but that was no big deal to us. We had often gone for walks really late at night before my dad was still awake watching television. We let him know that we were bored and going for a quick walk. He didn't really care all that much, just told us to be careful and take a flashlight with us. He also suggested I take my rifle out with me as well, which I decided to do just to make him happy. Since we lived in an extremely rural area, it wasn't unusual for a kid my age to have his own gun. We set out and began smoking as soon as we got out into the woods. It was extremely dark outside, so we had to use the flashlights right away. There were some paths to walk on created by years of people simply walking through the forest. We just walked along those deeper and deeper into the trees. For a while, the walk was just a normal walk. We didn't have anything happen or anything out of the ordinary. After a while, though, we noticed something lying off to the side of the path we were on. As we got a bit closer, we were pretty shocked by what we saw. There was a dead deer just lying on the ground. That in itself was not unusual, but it was cut up pretty bad. It was like some animal had killed and molded only in the area it was wounded in. What was especially weird was that many of the edible parts of the deer were left over as well. It seemed strange to both of us that any animal would have done this and left so much meat there. Hey, what if we run into a bobcat or something that did this? Lloyd asked me. I held up my rifle. That's what we have this for, don't misunderstand me. However, I wasn't going looking for something to kill. I would just absolutely use my rifle to protect myself from whatever was out there. We didn't think a whole lot more about it, and kept walking through the woods and smoking. Now, though we were listening to the noises around us much more closely, we were talking about the possibility of a bobcat. And I guess the more we talked about it, the more we convinced ourselves one might be out there. We were not too scared, though. I don't know how long we were out, or when we decided to turn around and head back toward my house, but eventually we did so. It was pretty late. Into the night. We were pretty stoned at that point, too, but no more than we were used to being. It was on the way back that Lloyd began to get a little bit paranoid. He kept on telling me he was hearing things out in the woods. I wasn't hearing any of the noises he described myself, and I told him he was just being paranoid because he was stoned. He was absolutely confident, though, that he was hearing something out there. He was confident something was walking the woods with us. He began getting really worried that another animal was out there stalking us. I still couldn't hear the noises he'd been talking about, though. The more we walked along, the more paranoid he got. He kept asking me, whispering over and over, "Did you hear that? Did you hear that?" I hadn't heard any of the things he was talking about, though. When we crossed back toward the area we'd originally seen that deer, we were surprised to see it was already no longer there. This just increased Lloyd's paranoia, and he began scanning the area, trying to see if an animal had dragged it off somewhere holy. I heard his whisper as he grabbed my arm. Lloyd made me look over into the woods, but wouldn't shine his light in that direction. Although it was dark, I could see what looked like a large figure somewhere out in the woods. It was moving around too. I grabbed a flashlight and shined it over at whatever it was that we were looking at. We saw the deer, and whatever this big figure was obviously pulling it. It quickly darted out of the way before we could fully shine the light upon it. However, we had both seen this for the first time. I was just as scared as Lloyd, or perhaps even more. I didn't know who or what we just saw, but after what we remembered from seeing the deer and what we had seen in the dark, I knew someone or something was out there to let them know we were armed. I took my rifle and fired one shot into the air, hoping that would scare whatever it was away. We need to get out of here. Lloyd told me I agreed, and the two of us began jogging along the path to get out of the woods. We were scared of that thing that might have killed that deer. We wanted to get as far away from it as possible. We didn't know if it tried following us, but we got out of the woods as fast as we could, and what we had seen was not very far from the house either. We both rushed in and locked the doors behind us. It was hot outside, and we usually kept the doors open. They were usually left unlocked too, so this was a very rare thing. The two of us went and hid out in my room and kept the gun with us fully loaded. We didn't sleep at all that night. I guess that really shouldn't be surprising, though. About a month later, this really huge guy was arrested in those woods not far from our house. Apparently, he'd attacked a police officer who had stopped to question him. I have no doubt it was the very same person we saw that night.